Today we're making a greeting card that literally plays music. You know, like those fancy, super expensive ones you'd see at the store that your mom would never let you buy? That's what we're making today, except we're actually making our own custom version, so this one's even cooler. I'm gonna show you the exact sound module that I use, how to load music onto it, and of course we have to make the card itself, and yes, it is going to be a card featuring a corgi shaking its butt. I promise that'll make sense by the end of the video, but if you've ever wanted your cards to sing, talk, or just surprise someone in the best possible way, you're gonna love this. Let's get started. All right, so let's get started with the thing that I'm sure most of you are curious about. This is actually the sound module that we're gonna use to make our greeting cards sing. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, while this is a more educational video of mine, I'm no expert in singing cards. I just got in my head one day that I wanted to make a card that plays music, and I went on Amazon, found something that I could load music onto that looked like it could fit inside of a greeting card, and I was off to the races. So just keep that in mind. This is how I have been creating my musical greeting cards recently, but that doesn't mean there's not a better way out there. Now, like I said, this is just a little microchip with a speaker on it that I picked up off of Amazon. Now, I think you can buy a couple of different speaker modules out there. This one actually has a push button, so the music won't start playing until you push this little button. There are options out there. I did see when I was doing my very little bit of research, there are options that are activated by actually opening a card. However, I just figured the push button would be easier to figure out and use, so that's what I went for. I'll leave the link to this down in the description below. I'll also try to find a few other options and cheaper options because I think this one does run almost $10, which is very pricey. These are for very special occasion cards, but I'll leave the link to this one as well as a few others down below. Just keep in mind, this is the specific one that I have been using. Now, more about this later, but the main thing I wanted to point out right here at the beginning is the thickness. So you can see when you turn it to the side, this puppy is kind of thick. So we're gonna need to account for that in our greeting card because obviously we want this to be hidden inside the card. And I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. So personally, I like to hide the sound module in the card base itself. So what I have here is a 110-pound smooth white piece of cardstock. And I've cut this down to the dimensions that I would normally use to create a horizontal based greeting card. So it's 5.5 inches wide. And the only difference is instead of it being 8.5 inches this way, because you know we have 5.5 by 4.25 makes our A2 size card, doubled. Typically for our card base we would have 5.5 by 8.5. In this case, I actually have 5.5 by 8.75. So I added a 1/4 inch in length this way. I'm going to show you exactly why. So when it comes to scoring our card base, what we're going to do is take your card base and put it in your score tool. I'm going to score like I normally would at this 4.25 mark. And then I'm actually going to do a second score line 1/4 inch down. So you can see I'm at my 4.25 inch mark, and I'm going to go over 2/8 or 1/4 inch and do another score mark. So basically what I'm doing is instead of having one singular score line down the middle of my card, I'm actually using 2 score lines and I'm creating basically a book cover. So let's go ahead and reinforce both of those score lines with a nice little burnish using our bone folder. Ta-da! Now let's do the other one. And there we go. You're going to end up with something that looks like this. Yes, is this going to be a thick card? It is. But what this is going to do is it's giving us enough room here in the inside to actually slip in our sound module. Now, right off the bat, you're probably thinking, okay, that's going to be difficult to mail. And yeah, it might be. This might be best to throw into a package or to gift to someone in person. Like I said, there might be better ways out there to do this. This is just the way that I've been doing it. All right, I'm going to set this to the side, and then before we actually get to working on the sound, I want to go ahead and create my card front. You didn't think you'd get away from me making an actual card design today, would you? I didn't think so. Now, like I said, we are creating a corgi-themed greeting card today. Don't ask me why. I've just had this image in my head for a while now of creating a greeting card with a corgi on the front where its butt kind of wobbles back and forth because corgis are very bootylicious. And as I was thinking about that, I realized I had the perfect song to go with that. So we're doing it. So the first thing I did for this card, actually before I even started filming, is I cut out and glued together 2 of these little corgi guys. Now there's only going to be 1 corgi on the final card, but you'll see why I cut out 2 here in a little bit. And these were designed by a small shop called Erica Digital Designs, I believe. I found them just in the regular old Cricut All Access image library, but I will leave a link to her shop down below as well. I was honestly thrilled when I found this cut file because it is pretty much exactly what I was looking for. So let's keep these up here just for inspiration. And what I want to get started on now is the background. So first things first, I'm actually going to add a tiny little bit of tape runner to the back of my card here. Pro tip, this is something I do all the time whenever I'm working on my glass craft mat. It just kind of helps hold the paper in place. Yes, you could use a grip mat as well, but my grip mat is in the other room. And right now, tape runner is just quicker. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is grab a little bit of mint tape, which is just a low-tack repositionable masking tape. And with that tape, I just want to mask off, what is this? Maybe the bottom third of the card. Something like so. That looks like about a third, right? And what I'm doing is I'm creating just a basic kind of landscape. So I'm going to have grass down here, and then I'm going to have a pretty blue sky up here. And then I also want to add a little fence line and maybe some trees and just have our little corgi guy as if he's, I don't know, frolicking through a field, if you will. So for that image, what I want to work on first is the sky. And for that, I'm using this cloud stencil that I got from Waffle Flower forever ago. I'm not sure if they still sell this. I'm sure they do, but you can find cloud stencils pretty much anywhere. And you know what? Actually, let me start with these real rolly clouds first. Something like that. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of distress ink. This is in the color Salty Ocean. This is kind of my go-to distress ink color when it comes to blue skies. Obviously, you can use whatever color you want or any shade of blue. I don't know. I always feel like this is the perfect shade for just a beautiful, sunny blue sky. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to turn my stencil around just to get some varied cloud lines here. And just add another layer. All right, that is looking beautiful. I'm going to add maybe, should I don't know. I get so torn on these things. I'm going to add just a tiny bit, a tiny little cloud line up here at the top. Hopefully I'm not going too overboard. No, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, I do have a little bit of a smudge there. You know what? Since this is distress ink, I think I can get my finger a little wet and mostly pick that up. Don't tell anyone I licked my card. Okay, now lastly what I want to do is pick up a little bit more ink, and then I'm just going to softly brush on this bottom edge here, just to add a little bit more blue under these bottom white clouds, just to soften out the image a little bit. All right, that looks good, doesn't it? Now the next thing I want to do is take off my masking tape. And then this bottom portion is actually going to be all grass. Now, before I get to ink blending the grass, I actually want to cut out a little piece of grass. So let's quickly do that. Now for my grass today, I'm going to be using this green from Hero Arts. I believe this is in the color Meadow. And I'm going to cut it out using this grass dye. This is from a company called Jane's Doodles that unfortunately is no longer in business, or at least is no longer selling physical products. But you can find grass dyes pretty much anywhere. Now, the only problem with this one, which you may notice right off the bat, is it's not long enough to fit my entire 5.5 inches here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape this down, and I'm going to cut only really half of it. And this is a little hack that is probably not new to most of you, but it's a way to make your dies kind of stretch a little bit further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through, but I'm only going to run it up until about here. So I'm not going to run it all the way to the edge because I don't want to cut that edge off. So here we go. Crank, crank, crank. Oop. You go kind of blind, so you have to trust the process, and then crank it back out the opposite direction. So you can see I've cut up to here, and I didn't cut that end edge. And then what you're going to do is take that die, and then you're just going to kind of shuffle it over a little bit, just like so. Tape it again. Now this time, turn it the other direction. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to roll, 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 crank, 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 but not all the way. And then crank it back out. Now let's see. Ooh, did we get it? Ooh, we are very close. You know what? I should have rolled it a tiny bit further, but that's okay. You can always roll again. All right, that looks good. I think we are good now. Now look at that. We have a long piece of grass. Now the reason I wanted to cut that first is not actually to get this die cut piece. I'm gonna put this die cut piece here on the bottom, but what I actually wanted is I wanted this reversed die cut piece here because I'm gonna use this as a stencil. So I'm gonna place this right here, kind of a little bit overlapping that blue, which I think is fine because I want the grass blades to kind of poke up and blend with the sky, you know what I mean? And so let's just tape that down. La-ti-da. And you know what? I have this tape that I used earlier for the sky. I'm gonna go ahead and put this here too, just so that I don't accidentally get any green up there on the sky. That would be bad, right? So I'm gonna grab my green brush, and then I have some more distress ink. This is in the color Mowed Lawn, which seems very fitting, doesn't it? And I'm just gonna ink blend this entire bottom portion using this die cut piece up here as a stencil. Now I'm curious, y'all, I haven't done one of these kind of talking while I craft videos in a while. I've been doing more like videos where I just do the craft and I film it, and then I go back and film myself talking about something related, maybe unrelated, over it. I'm curious which ones you prefer. Do you like these that are a little bit more instructional or tutorial style / crafting in real time? Or do you like the other ones that are maybe a little more thematic and, I don't know, maybe I'm talking about something that's not directly related to crafting, but you're still getting to watch me create something. I'm curious. Let me know what you're liking. I will say these tend to be a little bit longer because I am talking through my process. The other videos can be shorter because I don't need to talk so much about what I'm doing. You just kind of see it. But I do think these could be more educational. I don't know. Are y'all coming here for education? Okay, beautiful. We have grass and my shoulder is officially tired. All right. Ta-da! Okay, so you see how that grass blade now kind of overlaps with the sky, just kind of overall making it look a little bit more realistic? That is exactly what we wanted. All right, we should be done with ink blending for the foreseeable future. So let's go ahead and clean this up. At least we're done ink blending on this background piece. And then we can go ahead and rub our adhesive off here too, because I don't think we will be needing that anymore. Beautiful. Okay, let's set that here to the side for a second. And then the next thing I want to do is work on that fence that I told you about. And that's going to be super easy. I'm just going to be using this fence die from Hero Arts. What is this called? Wood Fence Fancy Die. That's easy enough. And I'm going to cut this out twice. And the reason I'm going to cut this out twice is because I want to take two pieces and layer them just so that the piece is thicker in general to add some more dimension to the card. But since it's already so thick and we're gonna have to use that foam tape to put our sound recording device inside of it, I figured that stacking two pieces would be a little bit better than adding more foam tape in thickness. Does that make sense? All right, and here we go. We have our two fence pieces. Now, I can't remember the name of this color of cardstock, but again, everything that I use, as always, will be linked down in the description. Now, what I want to do with one of these is add a little bit of ink to it just to give it a little bit more depth and dimension and make it look a little bit more realistic. Now, I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but I am going to take my ground espresso distress ink, and this is just a medium size ink blending brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of ink and just try to add some ink wherever I think there might be a little more darkness on the fence. For instance, down here at the bottom where the fence meets the ground, there might be some shadows from the grass. So let's add a little bit of darkness there. And then I'm also just going to lightly kind of tap it around everywhere or rub it around everywhere. Let the ink kind of settle into those grooves. And then with a mini ink blending brush, I'm going to pick up some more of the same color. And I'm going to go in and try to get these wood slats that are running horizontally just by running up and down with my mini ink blending brush. Do you see how now that background one is a little bit darker, adding a bit of a shadow effect? You can kind of see the difference here between these two. one with the ink and one without. This one looks like it has a lot more texture and a little bit more realistic than this one does, doesn't it? All right, now let's clean this up. I believe we are actually done ink blending this time. I had to bring my glass craft mat back into this new craft studio. By the way, have any of you noticed that I switched my surroundings / studio? I am shocked that no one has commented on that. I've been in this new studio for like 3 or 4 videos now, and I don't think anyone's commented on it, which I think is a good thing. That means it must be a good change. No one's noticing it in a bad way. But yeah, I'm in a new studio, y'all. But I wasn't using my glass craft mat for a while because I was afraid that these lights that I have all around me would be reflecting off of this like crazy. Also, I thought the wood was kind of a cozy vibe, you know what I mean? But I had to bring it back in here because it's just hard for me to craft without it, y'all. So what you just saw me do was I was layering up my die cuts, just added a little bit of adhesive and lined them up just like so. Very easy, not hard at all. And then over here on my background, let's go ahead and add the fence. Now I already know I'm not going to use this entire fence, so I'm only putting adhesive on these 4. And I'll line up the edge of the fence with the edge of the card, and that'll give us something like that. Let's go ahead and cut off the excess. Actually, I wonder if the excess would be, well, let's see. I hadn't thought about that. I wonder if the excess would be cute over here. I guess that doesn't really give a very large opening for our corgi, does it? I don't know. We'll just leave that off. And then across the bottom here is where I'm going to add my grass die cut, just to again add a little bit more texture and depth. And for that, I am going to use a little bit of foam tape. This is a very thin, I think 1/8 of an inch foam tape, so nothing too crazy. But I do think that might be a little thick. So what I'm going to do is then go ahead and cut this in half. This is something I do a lot, y'all. If you're wondering about what size of foam tape you should get, I would go larger. And if you need smaller, thinner strips, you can always cut them. Just make sure, you know, that you have scissors set aside as your dedicated adhesive scissors, if that's something you're concerned about. I promise y'all we're going to get to the sound part in just a second. There we go. All right, so the background is coming together very nicely, but before we get to assembling the card and adding in our music, I want to cut out one more thing, and that is a tree. So I actually have 2 different colors of green cardstock here. And I don't want to make a full tree. I just want to have kind of, you know, big bushy trees coming down from the top. So we're really just kind of creating, why am I losing words? Like the fluffy nature of the tree. I don't know. You'll see what I mean. But to do that, we're actually going to be using cloud dies. So this is a great example of looking at your dies and thinking of ways to use them in a unique way that they maybe weren't intended for. This is a set of dies called, I think, stitched rolling cloud edges. This is one of my favorite die sets to use for clouds. But today, I'm actually going to use them to create some trees. And I'm going to cut one of these out in green. Well, I guess they're both green. One of these out in light green and one of these out in a darker green. And voila, there you go. We have 2 little cloud pieces that are actually going to be serving as trees instead. And so I'm going to add just a little bit of adhesive on this lighter color tree, bush, whatever you want to call it. And just kind of, you know, layer them like so. And then what we'll do is we'll have this kind of coming down here over the top of the fence line, if you will. And then we'll have our little corgi sneaking through the fence. But we'll do all of that assembling after we work on our sound module, the part that you have all been waiting for. Now, like I said, this is a little microchip that also has a little speaker and this battery that powers the thing. Now, this is also going to come with a little USB-C cable that you can plug into the device. This is so that you can plug it into your computer and transfer MP3 files onto the device. There is also a way that you can actually record straight on this device, so you don't even have to use your computer. You can click the record button, talk into it, and then the recipient of the card will be able to play whatever you have recorded. Now, for today's purposes, we are going to be putting a song on here. So let's go ahead and plug this puppy in. You're also going to want to make sure that it's turned on. There's the little on-off switch here next to the port. And then let's get our computer. Now, my computer doesn't actually have a USB port, so I have this little adapter in here, but if you have a USB port on your laptop, obviously you don't need this. I know a lot of you probably do have a USB port, but just ignore this. This isn't really part of the ordeal. Now, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and take this and plug it in to our USB port. And then it's really simple, guys. Let's go ahead and take a look. So once you plug your device into your computer, you're going to see this new drive here in your Finder window called No Name. I don't know if that's what all of them are called, but that's what the device was called when I got it. So go ahead and click into there, and then you're going to see this folder called rec_directory. This is where you want to place your recording file or your audio recording file. So go ahead and click into there. And then assuming you have an MP3 file already on your device, all you're going to do is find that MP3 file and drag it into that recording directory file. Give it just a second to copy over, and then that is pretty much it. Now, before you remove the device, remember to use the eject button. And now your device is ready to go. So let's go ahead and unplug our little sound module here. We are done with the laptop. Now, I would recommend before installing this into your greeting card, make sure that the device actually got the song or recording on it properly. Again, make sure that your device is turned on. And then when you click this button, it'll play your sound recording. If it is too loud or not loud enough, there's also a little volume button here. You can just keep pressing that and it'll oscillate through the different volume levels. And then that's pretty much it. Now we're ready to assemble our card. All right, so let's bring all of our pieces back into frame here. Before we install the sound module, let's go ahead and put on the rest of our dies here. Now let's see, how do we want this to go? I think something like that looks good to me. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of foam tape behind our treetops here. Not really sure how many pieces I need, just kind of whacking off a few. Okay, let's do something just like that. I feel like that's pretty good. And then we'll just go ahead and trim off the excess here. All right, beautiful. Now remember, I did say that our Corgi was going to be able to shake its butt, and so I'm going to show you how we're going to accomplish that. So the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to cut this little guy's behind off. Which I know you're probably asking yourself, Ralph, why did you glue on this face if all you wanted was the butt? And honestly, that's a good question. I don't know, I just felt like he needed to have his face, you know what I mean? Okay, so then we have something like this. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start trimming off some of his behind so that his legs aren't showing through whenever we glue the other bottom on top. Does that make sense? So then we end up with something like that. Okay, I actually think that that is pretty much perfect. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and glue this guy's head down. Okay, I think that looks good. And then the way we're going to make his bottom wiggle is I'm going to use a little plastic adhesive wobbler. Now, these are just little small plastic springs with adhesive on either end. You can find these on Amazon. They're super duper cheap. Now, all I want to do is peel off the bottom piece and apply that here to the back of his bottom. And then peel off the adhesive here on the top carefully. And then go ahead and line up his bottom like we did just a moment ago. Okay, perfect. So we end up with something like so. Isn't that cute? Okay, now last but not least, of course, we need to add sentiments. And I already cut this one out using my Cricut earlier. If you're interested in learning how to create custom sentiments using your Cricut, I do have a video on that. I'll leave that linked down below. You can check that out after this video. But I created a custom sentiment and cut it out that says, guess what? Because on the inside, it's going to say corgi butt. I'm realizing that this card feels a lot sillier when I'm like talking it out loud on camera than it did when I was originally coming up with it. But you know what? That's fine. But does anyone else know that old, was it a knock-knock joke? Or what was it? I don't know. There was like a weird old joke that people would say where they'd be like, guess what? And then the response was just chicken butt. So it's kind of a play on that, except instead of chicken butt, it's corgi butt. Okay, perfect. Now, the front of the card is done. All that we are missing at this point is we just need to install our little sound module into the card. Now, the way we're going to do that is, remember, we have our card base here. And what we're going to do with this card base is actually pretty simple. And yes, I did off camera go ahead and use my Cricut to write out corgi butt on the inside. So now we have a complete card when it comes to the front and inside sentiments. But what we're going to do for the back of our card is we're actually going to create kind of a box all around of foam tape. And I'm going to use kind of a thick foam tape. This is an 1/8 of an inch foam tape. What I used earlier was actually not an 1/8 of an inch. I believe it's a 1/16 of an inch. So this is quite a bit thicker. And like I said, we're just going to make a box all the way around this panel. And the thickness of the foam tape you use is really just going to depend on whatever sound device you're using. Mine is pretty thick, like I said, so I'm actually going to do an 1/8 of an inch foam tape here, like I said, but then I'm going to go on top of it and add another layer of a 1/16 of an inch foam tape. So yeah, it's going to be pretty thick. But again, this is a special card. I don't think of this as a card that I would give to any and everyone all the time, just on very special occasions. Now keep in mind, the way that I am configuring this is as if I would want to push the button for the sound while the card is closed, looking at the front of the card. If you wanted the recipient to open the card and then push the button, you would kind of do the opposite of what I'm doing here. So you can imagine I'm putting my card front here on the front, and then the sound piece is tucked behind it in this front panel. That way someone can, touch maybe up here in this corner. That's where I'm going to put the button and activate it. But if you wanted them to open the card first and then click it, you would actually build your box down here on the bottom, put your sound piece in, and then put a cover-up piece. Does that make sense? Hopefully this makes sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Now, like I said, you need to think about where on the card you want your recipient to push to activate the sound. For me, I think the most natural, obvious place would be up here in the top, and that's because there's nothing layered on top of it. So it's very easy for the recipient to click the button here. And so you can imagine, if I have my card panel here on the front, I want this button to be pretty much under this top corner, which means my button actually needs to be down here. And so you'll just kind of place your sound module in here based off of where it makes the most sense for your button to be. And then what I like to do is take just a little piece of foam tape here and secure that button in place. You're not necessarily taping the actual button down. You're just putting the foam tape there so that it's not really able to move. And then of course you can do the same thing with the device itself. Give it some little guardrails. That way it's going to stay right in place where you put it. And you know what? I'm just now realizing my button's in here upside down. I need it to be facing this way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a blank piece of cardstock. So this is just an extra little piece of cardstock that I cut out, and it is also 5.5 inches wide. However, it's not quite 4¼ inches long because we are placing this inside on kind of the spine, if you will, of the card. I wanted to give it just a little bit of breathing room, so I took off a sliver. But basically the same size as, your regular old A2 panel. And all that's doing is it's serving as a cover to cover up all of this internal mechanism, if you will. Just layer that on very carefully, like so. All right, and then last but not least, of course, we have to actually put our card front on the card. And just line that up with the front of your card. All right, and there we have it, our completed musical Corgi butt shaking card. Now, are y'all ready to finally see what song I chose for this card? Without further ado, yeah, I don't know. I have no words. I get an idea in my head and I have to execute. So that's what you got today. Butt shaking, wiggle wiggle, corgi, music, bouncy card. So at least you can't say we're not original around here. But with that, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope that you learned something, and if you didn't, I hope that you at least had a good time. I know I did. If you want to watch some more videos, be sure to check out some of the videos I mentioned throughout this video. I'll have them all linked down below, as well as all the supplies used in today's card. Also, announcement, if you are watching this recently after it's been posted, I'll leave the information down below. Be sure to go check out Workshop Week. I will be one of the instructors in the upcoming Workshop Week. If you're not familiar with Workshop Week, all the details are down below, but long and short of it, it's a free week-long event full of art and craft classes, workshops, if you will, taught by 40 different instructors and artists. I'm one of them, but there's 39 other amazing artists as well, so be sure to check down below and sign up for your free ticket. And with that, I finally bid you farewell. Thanks again for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.